At 11:16 p.m., Rochelle Mercer signed her name beneath a sentence that would later destroy everything she thought she had won. Seller represents that all documents supplied are authentic and that seller possesses lawful title. Across the conference table, an attorney slid forward the term sheet. $8,750,000. In exchange, Rochelle and Calvin Mercer would transfer the 31% interest they claimed in Mercer House Hospitality. Calvin signed next. Adrian Vale watched without blinking. Rochelle smiled. 15 years earlier, she had packed her 19-year-old daughter's clothes, who's into 2 duffel bags, and left them outside a locked house. Tonight, she believed that daughter was finally paying for walking away. Across Chicago, Danielle Mercer was still inside her flagship restaurant when her attorney called. Danielle, the buyer, was disclosed. She opened the document on her laptop. Her breathing stopped. North Meridian Strategic Partners, parent affiliation, Seorn Global Logistics. Her eyes dropped to the controlling party. Seo Do-hwan, the Korean man she had trusted for 14 months. The man who knew what her family had done. Danielle called him. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't do this." Silence. Then his voice, calm as ever. "I did." How long have you known? 11 days? Danielle closed her eyes. Her parents had put a price on 31% of her life, and the man she trusted had supplied the money. If you're wondering why Do-hwan did it, stay with me. Comment your city and local time, subscribe, and let's go back 14 days. 14 days earlier, before the lawsuits and the millions and the man Danielle trusted most made his secret offer, there had been another night she still remembered by the minute. June 14, 2011. Ravenport, Indiana. At 19, Danielle Mercer thought the hardest part of growing up would be learning how to build a life with almost no money. She was wrong. The hardest part was learning how quickly the people who loved you decide your future belonged to someone else. Danielle spent that summer taking hospitality classes at community college 3 mornings a week and working every shift she could get at Mercer Family Grill. The restaurant belonged to her parents, Calvin and Rochelle Mercer. 46 seats, red vinyl booths. A breakfast rush that started before sunrise and a dinner crowd made mostly of people who had known Calvin since high school. Danielle did whatever needed doing. She seated customers, counted inventory, ran food, closed registers, and sometimes took deliveries when the regular driver called out. Her younger brother Evan was 17, smart, charming, restless, and in Calvin's words, headed somewhere. That phrase followed Evan through the house like a private blessing. Danielle never resented him for it. Not then. On the evening everything changed, Danielle was supposed to close. At 8:42 p.m., she was in the kitchen, checking a delivery invoice when Rochelle walked in carrying her handbag. "Where's Evan?" Danielle looked toward the back door. "I thought he went home." He didn't. Calvin came in from the dining room. His face had already changed. Not panic exactly, something tighter. He grabbed the keys from the hook near the office. "The van is gone." Danielle straightened. "Even took it?" Nobody answered. Calvin was already dialing. The first call went unanswered. The second, too. On the third, Evan picked up. Danielle could hear his breathing from 6 feet away. Fast, broken. Then Calvin's face emptied. "Where are you?" "Apa, what happened?" Another pause. Calvin closed his eyes. "Don't move." He hung up. Rochelle was already reaching for her coat. Danielle followed them. The accident was 3 miles away, near the intersection of Palmer Road and County 8. A bicycle lay twisted beside the curb. The delivery van had stopped half across the shoulder. An ambulance was there, so were 2 police cruisers. Evan stood near the ditch with his hands over his face. The cyclist, a 46-year-old warehouse supervisor named Thomas Keene, was conscious. His left wrist was badly injured. His shoulder had taken most of the impact when he hit the pavement. He would eventually recover. That did not make the scene look less frightening. Calvin went straight to Evan. Rochelle went straight to Danielle. She took her daughter by the elbow and walked her 10 yards away from the officers. Listen to me. Danielle looked at her. What? You were driving. The sentence was so absurd that Danielle almost laughed. What? You were making the delivery. No, I wasn't. Rochelle lowered her voice. I know that. Danielle stared at her mother. For several seconds, the sirens seemed to move farther away. Rochelle continued. Evan wasn't authorized to take that van. He stole the keys. Keep your voice down. He hit somebody. Thomas is alive. Danielle looked toward the ambulance. That isn't the point. Calvin joined them. His voice was clipped. The insurance situation gets ugly if Evan was using the van without authorization. Danielle looked from him to Rochelle. Then, back. You want me to tell the police I was driving? Calvin did not blink. You've made deliveries before. That doesn't make it true. You have a valid license. You have a clean record. You're 19. Rochelle stepped closer. Your brother is 17. He is applying to college in 4 months. Danielle's stomach tightened. So, one mistake should not ruin his life. Danielle stared at her mother. Then she understood, not the plan, the calculation behind it. Her parents had already weighed both children, one future against the other. They had chosen which one could afford to be damaged. Rochelle reached for Danielle's hand. You're 19. Your brother still has his whole future. Danielle pulled her hand away. So do I. Her mother flinched as though Danielle had raised her voice. Calvin's jaw tightened. This doesn't need to ruin anyone. Then don't make me the person it ruins. For 1 second, nobody spoke. A patrol officer approached. Mr. Mercer? Calvin turned. The officer asked who had been operating the van. Calvin looked at Danielle. It was not a request anymore. It was a command delivered without words. Danielle could feel Rochelle beside her, could hear Evan crying behind them, could see the injured man's bicycle under the flashing lights. The officer waited. Danielle swallowed. My brother was driving. Calvin's face hardened. The officer looked toward Evan. You saw him take the vehicle? No, but I wasn't here. I was working at the restaurant. He took it before we realized the van was gone. Rochelle whispered her name, Danielle. It sounded like a warning. Danielle kept her eyes on the officer. I wasn't driving. That was all. No heroic speech, no shouting. Just the truth. The kind that takes less than 5 seconds to say and years to survive. The rest of the night moved through paperwork, questions, insurance calls, and the particular exhausted silence that follows a family argument no one wants to admit has become permanent. Thomas Keene was taken to the hospital. Evan gave his statement. There was no dramatic arrest, no handcuffs, no television crime scene. There were consequences, but they were the ordinary kind. Insurance problems. A civil claim. A long discussion about who had authorized the vehicle. Possible liability for the restaurant. And Evan's humiliation. By 10:17 p.m., Calvin had stopped speaking to Danielle completely. Rochelle spoke only once. You always have to prove you're right. Danielle looked at her mother across the police station lobby. This isn't about being right. Then what is it about? Not lying. Rochelle looked away first. Danielle finished her shift because nobody had officially told her not to. She returned to Mercer Family Grill, closed the register, wiped 2 tables someone else had missed, turned off the kitchen lights, and locked the restaurant at 11:21 p.m. She walked home. 17 minutes. Her feet hurt. Her uniform smelled like fryer oil. She wanted a shower, nothing more. At 11:38 p.m., she put her key into the front door. It would not turn. She frowned. Tried again. Nothing. Danielle stepped back. The porch light was on. That was when she saw the bags near the garage. 2 black duffels. Her backpack, her work shoes, her winter coat, folded badly across the top. For several seconds, she could not understand what she was looking at. Then a shadow moved behind the glass. Calvin, her father, stood in the hallway. Danielle stared at him. He did not open the door. Her phone rang. D-Dade? Danielle answered without taking her eyes off him. What are you doing? His voice came through the phone while his mouth moved behind the glass. You made your choice tonight. What choice? You chose a stranger over your brother. I told the truth. You embarrassed this family. Evan took the van. He made a mistake. And you wanted me to take it for him. You could have protected him. Danielle's throat tightened. By lying to the police? Calvin's expression did not change. By protecting your family. Danielle looked at the duffel bags, then at the man behind the door. I am your family. Calvin was silent for 2 seconds. Those 2 seconds stayed with her longer than everything else. Then he said, not if this is what family means to you. Danielle pressed the phone harder against her ear. Open the door. No. Dad, you chose the truth. His hand moved toward the light switch. Then let the truth take care of you. The call ended. Danielle kept the phone against her ear. Calvin was still there, 15 feet away. Then the porch light went dark. So did the hallway. Danielle stood outside the house where she had slept every night since childhood. 2 bags at her feet. No plan. No room. No idea where she would go. She did not know that upstairs, Rochelle had packed those bags herself. She did not know that by 9 the next morning, her mother would tell an aunt that Danielle had walked out after refusing to take responsibility for what happened. By noon, another relative would hear that Danielle had abandoned the family restaurant. By the end of the week, the story had become simple. Danielle left. Danielle chose herself. Danielle broke the family. Evan heard the story. He knew it was false. He said nothing, and for the next 15 years, that silence would become almost as important as the lie itself. What Danielle could not know that night was that 15 years later, Evan would finally be asked one question silence could no longer answer. The first night, Danielle Mercer slept in someone else's living room. She kept her shoes on. Anne. Maribel Torres noticed. She noticed everything. At 47, Maribel had worked enough rats to know the difference between a girl who needed help and a girl who had already decided she would never ask for it. She was a line cook at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the community college. She had seen Danielle come in after midnight wearing the same uniform for 3 shifts, carrying 2 duffel bags. She never explained. On the 5th night, Maribel finally asked, "You sleeping somewhere safe?" Danielle hesitated too long. That was answer enough. Maribel lived in a narrow apartment above a laundromat with 1 bedroom, 1 sofa, and a kitchen table that leaned slightly left. She did not offer Danielle a new family. She offered 30 days. A door, Maribel said, handing her a spare key. That's all I can give you. What happens after you walk through it is yours. Danielle never forgot the sentence. She also never stayed 30 days. She stayed 26. By then, she had saved enough for a room in a house shared by 3 other women. The rent was $412 a month. She worked breakfast shifts at 1 restaurant and evening banquets at a hotel near the interstate. She learned quickly that hospitality had 2 separate faces. Customers saw linen, lighting, smiles, and plated food. Behind the doors were inventory sheets, refrigeration logs, supplier failures, labor costs, scheduling problems, broken dishwashers, and managers trying to solve 5 emergencies without letting Table 12 know any emergency existed. The systems underneath it. She became the person who knew which freezer made the strange clicking noise before it failed, which server could calm an angry wedding party, which vendor always shorted deliveries on Fridays, and which manager would hide a mistake until it became expensive. At 21, she became banquet coordinator. At 23, inventory supervisor. At 24, assistant operations manager. She finished her hospitality degree 1 class at a time. There were no graduation photographs with family. Maribel attended. She brought supermarket flowers, wrapped in plastic, and complained that the chairs were uncomfortable. Danielle laughed harder that day than she had in years. But her first real business opportunity came at 26. A chef named Gregory Shaw owned a small bistro on the south side of Chicago. The food was excellent. The business was dying. Gregory could cook. He could not control labor. He ordered emotionally, scheduled badly, and treated invoices like bad news that might disappear if left unopened. Danielle spent 6 months consulting on weekends. Food costs dropped. Waste fell. Payroll stopped swinging wildly. Gregory offered her 15% ownership instead of a larger consulting fee. Danielle took it. It was not romantic, it was terrifying. She used almost all of her savings. For 18 months, she learned what ownership really meant. When the grease trap failed, it was her money. When a freezer died at 2 in the morning, it was her money. When a cook quit 10 minutes before Saturday service, it was her problem. And when Gregory decided to leave Chicago to care for his father, Danielle bought the rest of his interest through a combination of savings, seller financing, and a small business loan. She renamed the restaurant Mercer House, not Mercer Family, just Mercer, her name. The first 18 months were brutal. 1 month she paid staff before paying herself. Another month she did not pay herself at all. She learned not to confuse a full dining room with a healthy company. Revenue could look beautiful while cash flow quietly bled to death. But Mercer House survived. Then it grew. Location 2 opened 3 years later. Location 3 almost ended everything. Danielle chose the wrong neighborhood. The rent was too high. Lunch traffic never came. She kept believing one more promotion, one more menu adjustment, one more season would turn it. It did not. 14 months after opening, she closed the doors. Total loss. $183,000, $247. Danielle sat alone in the empty dining room after the final employee left. The walls still held the outline of framed photographs. One pendant light flickered over the bar. For 3 hours, she went through every decision that had brought her there. She did not blame the economy. She did not blame customers. She wrote down what she had ignored. Bad lease structure. Too much optimism. Not enough working capital. A location chosen because she wanted it to succeed, instead of because the numbers said it could. The next morning, she called every manager in the company and told them exactly what had happened. No excuses. That failure changed Mercer House more than the first success had. Danielle became slower, more disciplined, less impressed by growth for its own sake. By 33, Mercer House Hospitality operated 11 restaurants and a catering division across Chicago. 280 people depended on its payroll. Danielle still reviewed temperature logs, still checked labor reports, still walked through kitchens before dining rooms. Success had not made her less careful. It had simply given more people consequences when she was wrong. That was the woman Seo Duhuan met, not a frightened 19-year-old, not a waitress waiting to be discovered. A 33-year-old founder standing beside a loading dock at 10:14 p.m. Arguing with an event manager because 3 refrigerated trays had arrived 4 degrees above standard. The fundraiser was for a hospitality training program serving young adults without traditional college access. Du Huan was one of the largest donors. He arrived late, black suit, no tie. 2 men behind him who did not look like charity staff. Danielle did not. She was holding a thermometer. Du Huan watched her reject an entire delivery. The event manager protested. "It's only 4 degrees." Danielle looked at him. 4 degrees is the difference between safe and hoping nobody gets sick. The trays went back. Only then did she notice Du Huan. He was standing 10 feet away. "You don't trust your people?" he asked. Danielle wiped the thermometer and put it away. "I trust people." She glanced at the rejected trays. "I verify. Systems." Something almost like amusement moved across his face. "Seo Du Huan, I know." That surprised him. "Should I be concerned?" "You donated $250,000. I read the sponsor list." That time, he did smile. Their first dinner happened 6 weeks later. Their second took another month. Du Huan never rushed anything that mattered. Danielle did not ask him questions she did not want answered. She knew Seoran Global Logistics was legitimate. She also knew legitimate businessmen did not have men quietly scanning every exit before they sat down. There were rumors, Mujin Circle, Korean organized crime, ports, private clubs. Names people stopped saying when strangers entered the room. One night, Danielle asked him directly, "Are the stories true?" Du Huan looked at her across a table in an empty restaurant. "Some? Which ones?" "The ones you already believe." Danielle studied him. "That is not an answer." "No." "But it isn't a lie either." "No." She should have walked away. Instead, she respected the fact that he did not ask her to pretend. Over 14 months, they developed rules without formally naming them. No surprise appearances at her business. No interference with employees. No gifts large enough to create obligation. No lies. The last rule mattered most. Danielle did not know yet that Du Huan would eventually break it without speaking a single false sentence. The trouble began with a magazine profile. Mercer House had been selected for a regional business feature after opening its 11th location. The article focused on Danielle's operational discipline, the failed third restaurant, and the fact that she had built the company after leaving home at 19. The headline appeared online on a Monday morning. By 34, Danielle Mercer built what she didn't at 19. A place of her own. In Indiana, Rochelle Mercer read it before breakfast. She read the phrase leaving home twice, then a third time. By 9:30, she had called Calvin. By noon, she had sent the article to Adrian Vale, and 72 miles away, Evan Mercer opened the same story on his phone. He read it once, then again, then a third time. At 4:26 p.m., the front desk at Mercer House received a call from an Indiana number. The caller asked for Danielle. When the receptionist offered voicemail, the line went silent. 14 seconds later, it disconnected. Danielle never heard a voice. She did not know. Her brother had been sitting in his parked car with both hands shaking around the phone. She did not know he had spent 15 years hearing their parents say she left, and 15 years knowing exactly who had changed the locks. 3 days later, Rochelle Mercer walked into Adrian Vale's office carrying a folder. Inside was the beginning of a story Danielle had never signed, and Adrian knew exactly how much 31% of that story might be worth. Adrian Vale did not look surprised when Rochelle Mercer placed the folder on his desk. That was the first thing Calvin noticed. Most lawyers reacted to trouble by asking questions. Adrian reacted by becoming quieter. His office overlooked the Chicago River from the 36th floor, all gray glass and pale wood, designed to make conflict feel expensive. Rochelle slid the magazine profile toward him. "Our daughter is telling people she built this company alone." Adrian did not touch the article. "What exactly do you want?" Calvin answered first. "Recognition." Adrian looked at him. Rochelle answered honestly. "Ownership." That was when he opened the folder. Inside were old restaurant records, photographs, tax documents, copies of menus from Mercer Family Grill, and a draft agreement Rochelle said had been kept with family papers since 2011. Adrian read it once, then again. His eyes stopped on one number, 31%. He said nothing. Years earlier, that percentage had appeared in another dispute. Different family, same structure. A derivative participation interest. Adrian knew strange numbers sounded more credible than round ones. 30% looked invented. 31 looked calculated. He closed the folder. "How public are you willing to make this?" Rochelle sat straighter. "As public as necessary." Adrian smiled for the first time. The lawsuit was filed 9 days later. Danielle learned about it at 7:52 on a Wednesday morning while reviewing staffing projections for Location 12. Her attorney, Miriam Holloway, arrived without coffee. That was how Danielle knew the news was bad. Miriam placed a thick packet on the conference table. They filed in Cook County. Danielle turned the first page. Mercer et al. v. Mercer House Hospitality LLC. She kept reading. The claim was not that her parents had loaned her money, not that they had invested in her first restaurant. It was worse because it sounded cleaner. They alleged that Danielle's early hospitality knowledge, brand identity, operating methods, and later ventures derived from a family partnership created when she was 19. Then she reached Exhibit C Mercer Family Expansion and Participation Agreement. June 14, 2011. Her own name appeared at the bottom. Danielle stared at the signature. I never signed this. Miriam did not answer quickly. Then we treated as disputed from the beginning. Danielle turned the page. 31%. There it was. Not a request. A claim. By lunchtime, Adrian had already given a statement to a business reporter. We are not attempting to take Ms. Mercer's success from her. We are asking the court to recognize the family foundation on which that success was built. The wording was surgical. Danielle understood why it was dangerous. It made her parents sound reasonable. By evening, the first headline appeared. Family dismissed Clout's ownership of Chicago Restaurant Group. The next morning, a lender called, then another. Location 12 was 6 weeks into construction. Deposits were paid. Contractors were scheduled. The landlord had granted a narrow opening window. By Friday, the construction lender froze the next draw pending clarification of ownership. Danielle stood in the unfinished dining room, while plastic sheeting moved in the air conditioning. Her project manager held a tablet. If the draw stays frozen past Tuesday, the millwork crew moves to another job. How much to hold them? 38,700. And storage? Another. 12 a week if the equipment delivery gets pushed. Danielle closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them. Hold the crew. She approved the payment herself. She did not call Dujuan. Not yet. He called her that night. How bad? Danielle sat alone in her office. Manageable. That is not a number. You don't need the number. A pause. Normally he would have pushed. This time he did not. Have they explained the 31%? They claim some family partnership existed. Did it? No. Then why 31? Danielle looked at the lawsuit again. I don't know. Dujuan did. Not everything. Enough. The number had bothered him from the moment he saw it. At 1 to 7 the next morning, he was in a private office above one of Sioran's freight facilities near Bedford Park. His second-in-command, Kang Min Suk, placed a thin file on the desk. Adrian Vale. Dujuan opened it. Corporate disputes, asset transfers, a civil racketeering matter that disappeared before trial. Then, an older transaction connected to a former Mujin lieutenant who had moved hidden interests through shell companies. Dujuan's expression did not change. He turned 1 page back. 31% derivative interest. Same phrase, same architecture. Min Sik noticed. You think Vale built the Mercer claim? I think he has used this shape before. What do you want done? Dujuan looked at him. Nothing. Min Sik waited. Dujuan closed the file. People become careful when they feel hunted. He leaned back. Make him feel rich. 48 hours later, North Meridian Strategic Partners existed. Legally, cleanly. A special acquisition vehicle with counsel, funding verification, and one purpose that appeared ordinary on paper. Buy disputed private equity at a discount. Its attorney contacted Adrian Vale. The message was simple. North Meridian had reviewed public filings concerning Mercer House hospitality. If Calvin and Rochelle Mercer could establish lawful ownership of the claimed 31% interest, North Meridian was prepared to discuss acquisition. Adrian called within 19 minutes. He did not sound excited. That interested Dujuan. The first meeting happened without Dujuan. North Meridian's counsel offered $6.9 million. Rochelle wanted $8 million. Calvin barely spoke. Adrian asked questions about beneficial ownership of the buyer. Counsel answered only what rules required. The meeting ended without agreement. 2 days later, North Meridian returned with $8,750,000, subject to full due diligence, original documentation, chain of title, presentations and warranties, seller certification of authenticity. Rochelle read the number twice. Calvin asked how quickly they could close. Adrian asked for 48 hours. That night, he sat alone in his office with the buyer disclosure documents spread across his desk. North Meridian, a recently formed entity, capital Source layered through Sioran affiliates. Adrian leaned back slowly, then smiled. Co Duhwan. So the Korean had noticed him. Good. Adrian had no intention of stepping away. A normal attorney might have warned the Mercers that an acquisition during litigation created risk. Adrian did the opposite. He encouraged them. If your claim is legitimate, a buyer proves the interest has market value. Rochelle liked that sentence. She repeated it to Calvin later. What she did not understand was that Adrian saw something larger than $8 million. If Duhwan pulled Sioran Capital into a disputed acquisition, there would be records. Counsel communications, funding certifications, internal approvals, potential discovery. Duhwan thought he was building a room Adrian would walk into. Adrian was measuring the windows. Meanwhile, Danielle watched Location 12 bleed money. The millwork hold became extended, contractor charges. Equipment storage began. The landlord demanded written assurance that control of Mercer House would not change during the lease term. Her initial exposure climbed past $200,000. Then a trade publication reported that outside investors were evaluating the disputed Mercer interest. That article changed everything. Danielle read it twice. She called Miriam. What? Outside investors? We're trying to identify them. Someone is trying to buy my parents' imaginary stake? Yes. Danielle's voice hardened. Find out who. That same afternoon, Evan Mercer sat in his truck outside his daughter's elementary school. His phone displayed Danielle's name. He had typed 6 words. There are things you don't know. He stared at them. His daughter came through the school doors carrying a purple backpack. Evan looked at her, then back at the message. For the first time, he imagined someone telling his daughter to carry another child's mistake because her future mattered less. His stomach turned. He pressed send. 3 seconds later, fear won. He deleted the message from the thread, but Danielle's phone had already displayed the notification. She saw his name. Even Mercer. There are things you don't, then it vanished. Danielle stared at the screen. She did not call him, not yet, because another message arrived from Miriam. Buyer disclosure received. Call me immediately. Danielle opened the attached PDF, North Meridian Strategic Partners. She moved lower, parent affiliation. Sioran Global Logistics. Her fingers stopped. For seconds, the office seemed to lose sound. Then she found the controlling party disclosure, SEO Duo Wan. She called him. He answered on the first ring. Tell me you didn't do this. Silence. I did. How long? 11 days. Danielle stood. You used my family. Yes, you used Adrian Vale. Yes. Her hand tightened around the phone. You used me. For the first time, Duhwan took too long. Then yes. Danielle closed her eyes. You decided the outcome mattered more than my consent. I believed it did. That hurt more than denial would have. Danielle's voice dropped. That is exactly what my parents believed when I was 19. Nothing came back, so she continued. Your trap froze financing. Contractors are charging me to stand still. 280 people work for this company, Duhwan. You put their jobs inside a game they never agreed to play. I can cover every dollar. Danielle almost laughed. That is not the point. He knew it the moment she said it. Money was his first instinct because it restored control. Danielle was refusing to let him buy that control back. How much damage? No. Danielle, no. You don't get to audit the consequences after secretly creating them. Silence again. Then she said the sentence he would remember longer than any threat. If it affects my life, I deserve to know before you decide. Duhwan said nothing. Don't contact at me until I decide whether I still know who you are. She ended the call. In his office, Duhwan remained motionless, with the phone in his hand. Min Suk stood near the door. Boss? Duhwan looked at the screen. Acting first had kept him alive. Tonight, following her would only prove she was right. So he did something no one in the Mujin circle had ever seen him do. Nothing. And, across Chicago, while Danielle tried to calculate how much his secret plan had already cost her, Adrian Vale received confirmation that the Mercers were ready to deliver the original documents. The trap had worked. The problem was that two men now believed it belonged to them. The originals arrived on a Tuesday morning in two sealed document boxes. Danielle was already in Miriam Holloway's conference room when the courier brought them in. No Duhon, no North Meridian representatives. Just Danielle, Miriam, a forensic document examiner named Dr. Lena Okafor, and a litigation associate with 3 sharpened pencils lined beside his laptop. Danielle preferred it that way. For 11 days, someone else had been deciding what information she needed. Today, she wanted every page in front of her. Miriam broke the seal. The first documents were ordinary. Old menus, bank statements, photographs from Mercer Family Grill. Then came the agreement, Mercer Family Expansion and Participation Agreement. June 14, 2011. Danielle took the original with gloved hands. The signature at the bottom looked like hers. Close enough to fool someone who had only seen it a few times. Not close enough to make her doubt herself. I didn't sign this, Dr. Okafor nodded. I believe you, but belief is not what we file. Danielle almost smiled. Good. She read from the beginning. The language was dense, overbuilt, the kind of document designed to make something questionable feel official. Then her eyes reached the final page. Her name, her alleged signature, and underneath it, Danielle at mercerhousegroup.com. Danielle at mercerhousegroup.com. Danielle stopped. Wait. Miriam looked up. What? Danielle pointed. That email address didn't exist. The associate leaned closer. How sure are you? Danielle looked at him. The company didn't exist. The room went quiet. Mercer House Group had been incorporated on September 23, 2015. The domain had been registered 9 days later. The agreement was dated more than 4 years earlier. Dr. Okafor did not celebrate. She simply marked the line with a yellow flag. One inconsistency, she said. Now we find the rest. The first crack became 5. A phrase in the agreement, operational derivative participation, appeared almost word for word in Mercer House Incorporation documents created years later. The original electronic files supplied during due diligence had creation history inconsistent with 2011. The notary listed on one attachment had no matching entry for the date claimed. And under magnification, Danielle's signature showed hesitation where her real signature normally accelerated. None of those facts alone ended the case. Together, they changed its shape. Then Miriam found the courthouse file, Thomas Keene v. Mercer Family Grill, filed 15 years earlier. The case had been scanned into an older county archive and nearly missed because Mercer Family Grill had been entered under Calvin's personal business name. Miriam printed one deposition. Calvin Mercer. Danielle sat beside her as she read. Question: Did Danielle Mercer hold any ownership interest in Mercer Family Grill? Answer: No. Question: Was she a partner? Answer: Never. Question: Did she possess authority over future Mercer ventures? Answer: Absolutely not. Danielle read the last answer twice. For 15 years, her father had told people she abandoned a family business she supposedly owed loyalty to. Now, the same man was claiming that business had somehow owned 31% of everything she built afterward. Miriam placed the deposition beside the new affidavit. 2 sworn stories. 1 man. Both could not be true. Danielle leaned back. She expected satisfaction. What she felt was exhaustion. This should make me happy. Miriam shook her head. It should make the truth easier to prove. That's not the same thing. The next deposition was scheduled for Friday. Evan Mercer. Rochelle arrived first. Calvin sat beside her. Adrian Vale placed a leather folder on the table and looked as calm as ever. Danielle sat across from them. She had not spoken to Evan in 15 years. When he entered, the first thing she noticed was gray at his temples. The second was that he looked like their father when he was afraid. Evan took the oath. The questions began simply: name, age, occupation, relationship to the parties. Then Miriam moved to June 14, 2011. Mr. Mercer, who was driving the Mercer Family Grill delivery van that evening? Evan looked at the table. Adrian shifted slightly. Rochelle's face hardened. Miriam waited. Evan raised his eyes. I was. Nobody moved. Were you authorized to take the vehicle? No. Did your sister know you had taken it? No. After the collision, did your parents ask Danielle to identify herself as the driver? Evan swallowed. Yes. Calvin's hand closed around the arm of his chair. Did Danielle agree? No. What did she do? She told the police the truth, Rochelle whispered. Evan. Miriam turned. Mrs. Mercer, please do not coach the witness. Rochelle went silent. Miriam looked back at Evan. What happened after Danielle refused? Evan's breathing changed. Dad changed the locks. Danielle did not look at Calvin. She could not. Miriam continued. When? That night, while Danielle was finishing work. Who packed her belongings? Evan closed his eyes. For the first time, Rochelle looked frightened. Mr. Mercer? Evan opened them. Mom did. Silence, not courtroom silence. Family silence. The kind that arrives when a lie has lived so long it has furniture, habits, and holiday traditions built around it. Miriam asked the final question slowly. Did Danielle leave the Mercer home voluntarily? No. Did your parents later tell relatives she had left voluntarily? Yes. Did you know that statement was false? Yes. Why didn't you correct them? Evan looked at Danielle. His voice broke. Because if I told the truth, I'd have to admit she lost her family because of me. Danielle stared at the wood grain between them. For 15 years, she had been the only person carrying that night exactly as it happened. Now, someone else had finally picked up part of the weight. Too late, but not meaningless. The 31% itself became another problem. Dr. Okafor found that the structure in the Mercer Agreement was nearly identical to language used in a separate partnership dispute 6 years earlier. The companies were unrelated. The families had never met. But the phrase derivative participation interest appeared in both documents, paired with the same unusual 31% allocation. Miriam did not call it proof. She called it a fingerprint. When Danielle asked whose fingerprint, Miriam slid a copy of the older case across the table. Counsel of Record. Adrian Vale. That changed the temperature of the room. For the first time, the lawsuit no longer looked like two angry parents who had found an aggressive attorney. It looked possible that the attorney had done more than argue the claim. Danielle stared at Adrian's name. Does Duhan know? Almost certainly. The answer made her jaw tighten. Even now, pieces of her own case were moving through rooms she had never entered. Then from now on, Danielle said, if his people discover anything relevant to my company, I hear it through counsel. Not after someone decides I'm ready. Miriam nodded, agreed. At Evan's deposition, Adrian tried once to redirect the damage. Your sister had conflicts with your parents before that night, correct? Evan looked at him. We all had conflicts, and she had discussed moving out. She had discussed getting her own apartment someday. So she intended to leave. No. Adrian leaned forward. You just said, I said someday. Evan's voice steadied. She came home that night expecting her key to work. Danielle finally looked at him. That sentence hurt more than she expected. Because it was small. Because it was true. Because 15 years earlier, she had stood on that porch and tried the key twice before understanding she no longer had a home. Rochelle's composure finally cracked. We were trying to keep this family together. Evan turned toward her. No, Mom. His eyes were wet. You were keeping me safe. Then he looked at Danielle and making her pay for it. No one spoke after that for several seconds. Even Adrian stopped writing. For Danielle, that distinction finally mattered. It did not repair 15 years, but it separated the accident from the choice her parents had made afterward against her alone. Outside the deposition room, Evan caught up with her. Danielle. She stopped. He looked smaller without their parents behind him. I'm sorry. She studied him. You should have been sorry when I was sleeping in somebody else's car. I was. Being sorry in private didn't help me. He lowered his eyes. I know. Danielle waited. He did not ask forgiveness. That mattered. She walked away. Across town, Duwan received a different kind of warning. His attorneys had reviewed the North Meridian transaction. If Danielle's team wanted to use the acquisition process to show what the Mercers had represented as authentic, North Meridian's internal records could become relevant. Funding approvals, council communications, entity relationships, possibly more. Min Seek stood in Duwan's office. You can withdraw the offer and narrow exposure. No. Then we fight discovery. Duwan looked at the authorization form. No. Misinsik was silent. Finally, for her, Duwan picked up the pen. For what I did, he signed. That evening, Miriam called Danielle. The Mercer claim is collapsing. Danielle stood inside the unfinished location 12. The millwork crew had already moved to another project. Crated equipment lined one wall. How bad? For them? Very. For Adrian? A pause. We now have enough inconsistencies to ask harder questions about where those Dash documents came from. Danielle looked through the front windows at the dark street. And, for me? You're still carrying the construction losses. Danielle nodded. Truth did not refund storage fees. It did not restore contractor schedules. It did not return the weeks already lost. But for the first time since the lawsuit began, the numbers on the page belonged to reality. Not to a story someone had invented. And somewhere behind the legal filings, Adrian Vales was discovering something worse than a threat from C.O. Dujuan. A paper trail. One he had helped create himself. The lawsuit did not end with handcuffs. There was no dramatic arrest outside the courthouse. No television cameras waiting while Rochelle and Calvin Mercer were marched down marble steps. Reality was quieter than that, and for Danielle, more satisfying. 3 weeks after Evan's deposition, the Mercers withdrew their ownership claim. The court dismissed the 31% action with prejudice. They could not simply rewrite the same theory and bring it back again when the headlines faded. The disputed agreement, the impossible email address, the notary irregularities, and the conflicting sworn statements were referred through the proper legal channels for further review. Adrian Vale stopped answering reporters. His firm removed his biography from its website 2 months later. Nobody explained why. Danielle did not need them to. She had spent 15 years watching other people invent explanations for her life. She was finished inventing explanations for theirs. Winning, however, did not restore everything. Location 12 opened 117 days later than planned. The contractor had moved his best crew to another project. Equipment sat in paid storage. The landlord charged an extension fee. A refrigeration supplier increased its price before the reordered installation date. When the final accounting was complete, the lawsuit and the acquisition trap had cost Mercer House $286,417 that insurance, fee awards, and settlements would not recover. Danielle stared at the number for a long time. Then she approved the loss. That was what ownership meant. Sometimes being right still cost money. Dujuan asked to meet her 4 days later. She agreed to 20 minutes. They met in a private dining room before Mercer House opened for dinner. No guards inside, no flowers, no gift box waiting on the table. Dujuan sat across from her with both hands visible. The loss, he said, $286,417. Danielle's eyes narrowed. You were told not to audit me. My counsel received the number through discovery. Of course they did. I caused part of it. You caused enough of it. I can reimburse the company. No. Dujuan did not reach for a check, did not explain, did not tell her why accepting would be logical. He only nodded. Okay. Danielle looked at him more carefully. Months earlier, that answer would have been impossible for him. The old Dujuan would have transferred the money through a legal entity and informed her afterward. The new one was sitting still after hearing no. It was a small change. Small changes were the only ones Danielle trusted. The legal aftermath spread slowly. Calvin was ordered to contribute toward Danielle's fees. Rochelle faced separate scrutiny over the authenticity declarations she had signed during the attempted sale. Neither consequence erased what they had done, and neither turned them into ruined people overnight. That mattered to Danielle. She did not want revenge dressed up as justice. She wanted the record corrected. For the first time, relatives who had repeated the old story called her, with apologies. Danielle accepted some calls and ignored others. She refused to spend another year conducting a family-wide investigation into who had believed what. The truth did not require unanimous applause. It only required the lie to stop controlling the room. At Mercer House, Danielle told her team exactly what the delay had cost. Nobody was fired to make the quarterly numbers prettier. Bonuses were reduced, including hers, and the 12th location was reopened on a slower schedule. The company bent. It did not break. Henner Parrott, her parents, changed differently. Calvin wrote first. 3 pages. No request for forgiveness, no explanation that began with but. He admitted he had changed the locks. He admitted he had allowed Rochelle's version of the story to circulate because it protected him from admitting what he had done. Sue's sentence, Danielle read twice, was near the bottom. I called it loyalty because betrayal would have required me to look at myself. She folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and did not answer. Rochelle called once. Danielle almost let it ring out, then she answered. Her mother's first words were not an apology. Everything we did was for Evan. Danielle closed her eyes. 15 years, and Rochelle was still standing in the same room. That's the problem, Mom. What is? You always decided one child mattered enough to sacrifice the other. We were trying to protect your brother. You protected him from consequences. He was 17, and I was 19. Silence, Danielle continued. You keep saying it like 2 years made me disposable. I never said that. You didn't have to. Rochelle began crying. Once, that sound would have made Danielle rush to repair the conversation. This time she waited. I don't know how to fix this, Rochelle whispered. Danielle looked through her office window at employees preparing for dinner service. You don't start by asking me to make you feel better. Then she ended the call. It was not cruelty. It was a boundary. Evan came back 3 months later. He did not warn her. Danielle found him standing near the host desk at 2 in the afternoon holding a cardboard box against his chest. He looked terrified. What's that? Things from home. She nearly told him to leave. Instead, she carried the box into her office. Inside were pieces of a life she thought had disappeared. Her high school debate certificate, a photograph from her 16th birthday, 2 Christmas cards. Her first restaurant management textbook, the cover bent at one corner, a cheap silver bracelet she had believed she lost. Danielle touched it. You kept these? Evan nodded. Why? He looked at the floor. Because even when everyone said you left us, I knew we were the ones who left you. Danielle said nothing. Evan did not move closer. Did not ask for a hug. Did not say he had suffered too. That helped. Finally, Danielle closed the box. Coffee? Evan looked up. Yeah, it was not forgiveness. It was a door unlocked 1 inch. Du Juan had his own door to open. He waited until Danielle contacted him. No surprise dinners. No car waiting outside her office. No messages sent through employees. 6 weeks passed before she invited him to Mercer House after closing. He arrived alone, not because he had suddenly become harmless, because she had asked him to. He sat at a regular table near the window. Danielle approached, carrying 2 glasses of water. She sat opposite him. Du Juan spoke first. I was wrong. About what? I thought knowing more gave me the right to decide more. Danielle waited. He removed 1 white envelope from inside his jacket and placed it between them. She opened it. A single internal authorization page. Danielle Mercer. File closed. Data purged. Danielle looked up. What is this? Everything my organization collected about you. Her expression changed. Du Juan continued. Odessa's, financial history, family connections, travel, associates, daily patterns. You had all of that? Yes. Anger flashed across her face. He did not soften the answer. Danielle looked back at the page. And now, degraded. Everything. Everything I had no right to keep. She studied him. How do I know it's really gone? This was the moment the old Duwan would have anticipated. Server logs, signed certifications, fen witnesses, proof arranged before the question was asked. He provided none. You don't. Danielle's brow tightened. You decide whether to believe me. He paused. I don't get to manufacture proof of trust. Neither of them spoke. Outside the windows, Chicago moved through another ordinary night. Finally, Danielle asked, "And the next time you think you know better than me?" Duhwan answered immediately. "I ask." Danielle looked at the empty chair beside him, then at him. "Sit down." He almost smiled. "I am sitting, then stay." 8 months later, Mercer House opened its 12th location. Danielle cut the ribbon with Maribel Torres, her operations director, and 3 employees who had worked with her before the second restaurant existed. Duhwan stood in the crowd, not at her shoulder, not in front, exactly where she had invited him to stand. The restaurant also started something new. One evening each month, the private dining room became the second start dinner. Young adults aging out of foster care, people rebuilding after family estrangement, and workers trying to restart after sudden housing loss ate for free and met local employers, housing counselors, and vocational mentors. No speeches about saving anyone, no giant checks, just dinner. Contacts, a place to begin. Danielle understood something now that she had not understood at 19. That night, outside her parents' house, she had not needed an empire. She had needed one unlocked door. At 10:16 on the night of the first second start dinner, Danielle walked the final guests outside. Duwan waited on the sidewalk. She turned back and locked the restaurant. Click. Her hand stayed on the key. 15 years earlier, the same sound had told her she no longer belonged somewhere. Tonight, the lock was in her hand. Duwan did not ask what she was thinking. He waited. Danielle turned. Ready? Your call. She smiled. He had learned. Home. They walked toward the car together. Not because Danielle needed someone to take her home. Because home, at last, was no longer the place where other people decided whether she belonged. It was the place where she decided who was allowed to walk beside her. If Danielle's story stayed with you, tell me in the comments. What matters more to you? Family loyalty or telling the truth when loyalty demands a lie? And tell me where you're watching from and your local time. If you believe real love respects your choices instead of making them for you, subscribe and stay with us for the next story.